I need you to understand something about air traffic control before I tell you what happened. The entire system, every protocol, every checklist, every piece of equipment in that tower exists for one reason: accountability. We know where every aircraft is. We know its tail number, its altitude, its speed, its flight plan, its origin, its destination. We know who's flying it and when it filed and what route it's taking. Every single aircraft that moves through controlled airspace is known. That is not an aspiration. That is the foundational premise of the entire system. An unknown aircraft is not a mystery. It is an emergency. I worked air traffic control for 16 years. Regional airports, mostly the kind of facilities that handle commuter flights, cargo runs, private charters, the occasional medevac. Not the big centers where you're managing hundreds of aircraft at once. The smaller operations where you know the regulars. You know the tail numbers of the local flight school's training fleet. You know which cargo carrier tends to run late on Thursdays. It's a different kind of work from the big facilities, quieter, more personal. You develop a feel for the traffic that moves through your airspace, the same way a shopkeeper develops a feel for the regulars. I'm telling you this because what happened on a Tuesday night in November at a regional airport I'm going to call Carver Field was not something I misread. I did not confuse it with another aircraft. I did not make a procedural error that created a phantom contact on my scope. I have 16 years of experience, and I know what I saw, and I know what I heard, and I know what landed on Runway 2-7 that night. What I do not know, what I have not been able to determine in the time since, is what it was, because it was not in the system. It was not on my radar, and when it touched down and rolled to the end of the runway and turned off onto the taxiway, it did not stop. It did not go to the terminal. It did not contact ground control. It just kept moving slowly in the dark until I lost sight of it at the edge of the field. And then it was gone. Welcome to Eerie Atmos X. If you're new here, what we do is take the accounts that don't make it into the official record, the incidents that get classified as equipment anomalies or operator error, or just quietly closed, and we put them in front of you. Because these things happen. They happen more than the systems want to acknowledge, and the people they happen to deserve to be heard. Subscribe before we go any further, because this one goes places I didn't expect when I first started putting it together, and I don't want you to miss what's coming. Let me tell you about Carver Field first. Small regional airport, 2 runways, a modest terminal building that handles maybe 6 commercial departures a day on a busy schedule. The control tower is a standard regional setup, glass cab at the top, equipment room below, a small break room and office space at ground level. On the overnight shift, which I was working that November, the tower is staffed by 1 controller and 1 operations coordinator who handles the ground side. 2 people. Sometimes you go 3 or 4 hours without a single transmission. The scope is quiet. The radio is quiet. The airport is quiet. You drink your coffee and you watch your instruments, and you wait for something to happen. The overnight shift at Carver ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I had been on that rotation for about 3 months at that point, which meant I had the rhythms of the night traffic dialed in. I knew which cargo flights came through on which nights. I knew the approximate windows for the medevac helicopter that was based at the hospital across town. I knew which of the private pilots liked to do late-night cross-country flights and what their tail numbers were. The airspace around Carver at 2 in the morning is about as quiet as airspace gets. Usually by midnight, I'm looking at an empty scope and listening to the hum of the equipment and the wind against the cab windows. On that Tuesday in November, The weather was what we call marginal VFR, visibility reduced by low cloud cover. Ceiling at about 1,200 feet, light drizzle. Not impossible to fly in, but conditions that tend to keep the recreational pilots on the ground. By midnight, my scope was empty. The last departure had been a cargo twin that headed north at 11:40. I had logged it out, watched it hand off to the center, and settled in for what I expected would be a quiet 4 hours until the first morning arrivals. My operations coordinator that night was a woman. I'll call Dina. She had been at Carver for about 8 years, knew the airport better than anyone, and had the kind of calm professional manner that you want in someone sitting next to you during a long overnight. She was doing paperwork at her station when things started at 12:47 a.m. I heard it not on my radio, not through the standard channels. I heard it through the cab windows, a sound that took me a moment to identify because it was so out of place, so wrong for that moment that my brain resisted classifying it. It was an aircraft engine, a propeller aircraft by the sound, not a jet. Not a turboprop exactly, something older. A reciprocating engine with a particular rhythm to it, that familiar irregular beat that piston aircraft have. It was distant, but it was real. It was out there in the cloud layer, somewhere in my airspace. I looked at my scope. Empty, clean, not a single return, anywhere in the display. I checked my equipment. Radar normal. Transponder interrogation normal. All systems functioning within parameters. There was nothing wrong with my scope, and there was nothing on it. I keyed my radio on the common traffic, advisory frequency, the channel that pilots in the area are supposed to monitor when they're operating near an uncontrolled or low-traffic airport. I said, "Any aircraft in the Carver Field area, identify yourself and state your intentions." Standard call. The thing you do when you know someone's out there, but they haven't talked to you. Silence. Just the hiss of the open frequency and the sound of the engine through the cab windows. Getting slightly louder, I made the call again. Nothing. I switched to the emergency frequency and made the call there too. Nothing. The engine sound was definitely getting louder. Whatever was out there was getting closer. Dina had stopped her paperwork. She was looking at me from her station. I told her I had an aircraft audible in the area with no radar return and no radio contact. She nodded once and picked up the phone to call operations, standard protocol when you have an anomalous situation developing. While she was doing that, I kept my eyes on the scope and my ears on the cab. The engine sound was approaching from the northwest. Runway 27 runs east to west at Carver, which means a northwest approach would put an aircraft on a direct final for 27. I looked out the cab windows toward the northwest. The cloud ceiling was low, the drizzle was reducing visibility, and the night was dark. No moon, no stars, just a low orange glow of the town on the horizon, and the white and green of Carver's own rotating beacon turning steadily at the far end of the field. And then I saw a light, one light white at the nose of what appeared to be a small aircraft, descending through the cloud base on final approach to 27. I keyed my radio again. Unidentified aircraft on final for Runway 27 at Carver. You are not in contact with Carver Tower. Identify immediately. Nothing. I tried the emergency frequency again. Nothing. Dina was on the phone. I heard her saying to whoever was on the other end that we had an unidentified aircraft in the pattern with no transponder and no radio contact. I heard the person on the other end ask her to repeat. She repeated it. I didn't hear what they said after that because I was watching the light dot. It was descending steadily. No deviation, no wobble. The approach was clean and controlled, which was the thing that threw me more than anything else. A pilot who was lost or disoriented or in distress. They make corrections, they drift, their approach is ragged. This approach was perfect. Textbook final, stabilized, on the correct glide path for 2-7. Whoever was flying that aircraft knew exactly what they were doing and knew exactly where they were going. I turned on the runway lights at full intensity, which you do to let the pilot know you see them, that the airport is aware of their presence. The lights came up along the length of 2-7, that familiar double row of white, leading to the green threshold lights at the far end. Whoever was on final would be able to see them clearly. The aircraft kept coming dot. It crossed the threshold. It touched down. I heard the squeak of tires on wet pavement, which I will tell you is a sound you never forget once you've heard it at 2 in the morning, with no corresponding radar return and no radio contact and no flight plan and no tail number visible from your position. It touched down and it rolled out, decelerating in the way a properly landed aircraft decelerates, and at the far end of 2-7, it turned off onto the taxiway. I keyed ground control frequency. Unidentified aircraft, you have landed at Carver Field without clearance and without radio contact. Hold your position. Do not proceed to the terminal. State your tail number and pilot information immediately. Nothing. No response. No acknowledgement. The aircraft, whatever it was, made the turn onto the taxiway and began moving. Not toward the terminal. Not toward the ramp where aircraft park. Moving parallel to the field along the perimeter taxiway in the direction of the maintenance hangars at the south end of the airport. I picked up the phone and called airport security directly, bypassed operations entirely. I told the security officer on duty that an unidentified aircraft had landed without clearance and was moving on the south taxiway toward the maintenance area, and I needed someone out there immediately. He said he was on his way. I watched the aircraft's light moving along the taxiway. Slow, deliberate, no urgency, like it knew exactly where it was going. It reached the point where the south taxiway curves around the end of the maintenance hangars, and then the light went around the curve and out of my line of sight from the tower. Security got out there in 4 minutes. I was on the phone with him while he drove. He went around to the south maintenance area. He checked the taxiway. He checked the hangar aprons. He drove the full perimeter taxiway. There was no aircraft dot, not on the taxiway, not on the hangar aprons, not on any of the paved surfaces in the south maintenance area. No aircraft, no pilot, no one. He called me on the radio and told me the area was clear. I told him that was not possible. I had watched the aircraft turn onto that taxiway. I had watched its light go around that curve. He said he understood what I was telling him, and he was telling me the area was clear. I asked him to check the grass areas adjacent to the taxiway in case the aircraft had gone off pavement. He checked. Nothing. Dina was still on the phone with operations. I heard her relaying what security had reported. I heard the voice on the other end change in tone. Not alarmed exactly, but a different quality. Careful. The kind of careful you hear when someone is choosing their words, because they're aware that words have consequences. The FAA duty officer was contacted. An incident report was opened. 2 investigators arrived at Carver the following morning and spent most of the day reviewing the recorded radar data, the radio logs, the security footage from the airport cameras, and interviewing me and Dina and the security officer. The radar recording showed exactly what I had seen in real time, a clean, empty scope. No return, no transponder hit. No primary radar skin paint, which is what you get when you illuminate an aircraft that doesn't have a transponder. Even without a transponder, a physical aircraft will return a radar signal. There was nothing. No primary return whatsoever. The security camera footage, and this is the part that I think about most, showed the runway lights coming up at full intensity, which I had triggered from the tower. It showed the reflection of those lights on the wet pavement. It showed the empty runway. It did not show an aircraft. I heard it land. I saw it land. I watched it roll out and turn off and taxi away. The security cameras, which cover the full length of Runway Two-Seven from 2 different angles, recorded none of it. Just the lights, just the wet pavement, just the empty field. The investigators' report classified the incident as an unresolved radar and visual anomaly. Possible equipment malfunction in conjunction with auditory misidentification. They noted that I had been on an overnight rotation for 3 months and that fatigue could be a contributing factor. They noted that Dina had not directly observed the landing from her position, but had heard my communications. They noted that the security officer had found no physical evidence of an aircraft in the maintenance area. They did not note the thing I had told them in the interview, which I'm going to tell you now, because it is the part one cannot explain with equipment. Malfunction or fatigue or auditory misidentification or any other phrase in the report. When the aircraft, whatever it was, came down final and crossed the threshold of Runway Two-Seven, I had a moment where I could see it clearly against the runway lights. Small, single-engine, low-wing, classic design, the kind of aircraft you see in photographs from the 1940s and 50s, a design that hasn't been manufactured in decades. And along the fuselage, briefly visible in the lights before it rolled past my angle of view, were registration markings. I wrote them down immediately. On the notepad I keep at my station, I wrote down the tail number I had read off that aircraft. When the investigators arrived, I gave them that number. They came back to me about an hour later. One of them, older guy, the kind of investigator who has seen enough that his face doesn't give much away, came and sat across from me in the break room and told me they had run the number through the registry. The aircraft with that registration had been deregistered. The record showed it had been removed from the active registry following an accident. A fatal accident. A Tuesday night in November in marginal VFR conditions at a small regional airport that had since closed and been redeveloped. The accident report described a controlled flight into terrain on final approach, in low visibility, at an airport that had, and this is the detail that I have not been able to put down, since he told me that had a runway orientation of 2-7. The date of the accident was 23 years before the night I am describing to you. The investigator closed his notepad. He looked at me for a moment without saying anything. Then he told me the finding would be included in the report as a registration anomaly, and that the full report would be available through the standard foyer process. If I wanted to review it, I never reviewed it. I requested a transfer to day shift 3 weeks later. I left Carver Field entirely 8 months after that. I have not worked overnight at a regional airport since. What I think about is the approach. The clean, stabilized, textbook approach in marginal VFR on a dark November night. No deviation, no correction, just a descent that had been programmed in, maybe by muscle memory, by the repetition of 1,000 approaches on 1,000 nights before the last one. I think about what it means to fly a perfect approach in conditions that killed you. I think about what you would be flying toward. If you were flying toward an airport that no longer exists, on a runway that shares its orientation with this one, on the same kind of night, I think you would be flying home. I don't know what landed at Carver Field that night. I don't know what I guided down with those runway lights, or whether the lights even mattered, or whether whatever was flying that approach needed my help at all. I don't know if it found what it was looking for when it taxied away into the dark, but I know what I heard. I know what I saw, and I know that somewhere in the FAA's records, there is a report with a registration number that belongs to an aircraft that burned on a runway 23 years ago. And that same number is written in my handwriting on a notepad that I still have in a drawer at home. If you've worked in aviation, ATC, ground ops, flight crew, anyone who has spent time around airports at night, and you have a story like this, I want to hear it. The comments are open. This community is built on exactly these accounts, the ones that don't fit the official explanation, the ones that stay with you. Drop it below. And if someone sent you this video or it came across your feed, and this is your first time on Eerie Atmos X, welcome. Share this one. Not because of the algorithm, because this is the kind of story that deserves to travel. Because somewhere out there, there are people who know exactly what I'm talking about, and they've never had anywhere to put it. The scope was empty. The runway was empty. And something landed anyway. I've been in aviation for 16 years. I know what empty looks like. That night, empty wasn't the same as gone.